GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to the Saturday selection here on GB News with Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis. Coming up, we'll be going through the week's top stories with the help of celebrity chef and TV presenter Kevin Woodford. We're discussing whether net zero is a realistic target in a time of ever-increasing fuel prices. And we'll be speaking to the legendary lyricist Sir Tim Rice. All that to come, but first let's get the very latest news headlines.
Thanks, Esther. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his troops' resistance have dealt powerful blows to Russia. It's as Moscow claims Russia is moving to a new phase of its so-called special operation to focus on the eastern region of Donbass. But addressing global leaders in Qatar, he compared the city of Mariupol with Aleppo in Syria, saying it lies in ruins.
All the roads to the city are blocked. Russian troops do not allow to the city even humanitarian cargo. No food, no water, no medicine. Around the clock, the city is being shelled. 90% of all buildings in Mariupol have been already destroyed. Thousands of people are dead. But Russia's invasion still remains unchecked.
Meanwhile, the UK's Ministry of Defence says Russian forces continue to besiege a number of major Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol. It claims Russia is reluctant to engage in military ground operations and is instead relying on airstrikes to limit its own already considerable losses. The ministry also predicts President Vladimir Putin will continue to target urban areas at the cost of further civilian casualties. The UK is providing £2 million of food supplies to parts of Ukraine. The government said around 25 truckloads will be transported by road and rail to communities most in need. Police Minister Kit Malthouse told GB News the UK is now one of the leading donors, supplying £400 million worth of humanitarian aid. In other news, a P&O ferry has been detained in Northern Ireland for being unfit to sail. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency says the European Causeway ship is being held in Larne due to failures over vessel documents and crew training. It comes days after the ferry operator sacked almost 800 seafarers, replacing them with agency staff on cheaper salaries. Shadow Minister for Employment Rights, Justin Madders, told GB News these kinds of actions have serious consequences.
really got to use every tool at the disposal of the government to make sure P&O understand that they can't get away with treating people like this. In the end, if that's the way we go as a country, we're all going to lose out. So we've absolutely got to stand firm with those who've been sacked and do everything we can to send the message to P&O that those staff have got to be reinstated.
And the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have said the UK would support any decision made by a Caribbean state to become a republic. Prince William and Kate have been visiting Jamaica, Belize and the Bahamas as part of their Caribbean tour. Speaking at a black tie event in the Bahamas, the Duke said whatever the future holds, the bonds between the UK and the nations will endure. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, it's back to Saturday Selection.
Hello, this is Saturday's Selection on GB News. I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis. Shortly we'll be speaking to Reform UK leader Richard Tice about his party's call for a referendum on the country's net zero carbon policy.
But first, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by celebrity chef and television presenter Kevin Woodford to go over some of the week's top stories. So, Kevin, what has caught your eye?
Quite a lot going on, really, isn't there? It really is. But, you know, one of the things that we've had the lockdown situation, and there was an item in the news this week where it states that around about 135% increase in divorce rates. Okay, and I wondered what that was about. And looking into it, you think, well, is it because we're locked together for 2 years, man and wife or partners? Will that bring us closer together, or will it actually drive us apart? And they reckon 62% of the ladies initiate the divorce, and it makes you wonder why. And there's a great book by a guy called Matthew Frey, whose wife decided end the relationship because he left dirty glasses by the sink, right? And you think, well, is that really fair? But when you analyse it, and he did, right, after she left him and took a little boy away, he thought, well, perhaps she's got something going on here. Because I don't know about you, Philip, I'm sure you never leave your undies on the bathroom floor, do you? You pick them up and you put them in. What you do, don't you?
I bet you there's going to be a different answer coming from me.
I don't like these conversations going already.
No, okay. Well, all right, I'll cut away from that because that's too personal. But what Matthew... So he spent a lot of time analysing what was going wrong, you know. And he decided that there were three particular thoughts that would create a real problem in the marriage and end the marriage. The first one was him saying, your thoughts are wrong. In other words, he cracks a joke in front of friends.
Kevin, I'm writing this down, by the way.
Do it.
Thoughts are wrong.
It's evidence. No, do it.
I'd never dare say that about Esther,
no,
so I'm going to be on the winner there.
Let's see what you say about the other things. Right? Your
there.
Thoughts are wrong. So, in other words, you're at a dinner party and you crack a little joke and it's to do with Esther, right? You think it's funny. Everybody else around the table thinks it's funny, but she doesn't.
No,
so when she gets home with you,
when
she gets home, she says, that wasn't even funny. But you say, oh, it's just you.
Yeah.
You haven't got
You've been waiting to say that for about 2 hours. That wasn't funny.
Exactly.
Yes.
You sat there with a face for 2 hours, right?
I'm wincing thinking about that one.
Yeah. The second thing he says is this is justifiable defence, right? So in other words, Esther says to you, you must return this tax. You must do your tax return, and it's got to be done by 4 o'clock today. And you think, do you know what? That's pushing it. I'll do it by 6 o'clock and it'll be fine. And you do it by 6 o'clock and it is fine. But Esther's really annoyed with you because it should have been done at 4 because it's given her stress. So it's building up this whole stress.
That's likely to be the other way around in our relationship,
okay.
Can I say?
Okay.
Yeah, and he is good at all of
Okay,
this
and then finally your feelings are wrong. And this is the one, this is the one that really gets everybody, I think. It's the undies on the bedroom floor. It's the glasses by the sink, which Matthew got divorced for. And it's because in his view, or in our view, it's irrelevant, it's minor detail, and you should get a life and not worry about those things. But it builds up, and it really builds up. And it's those things which are accumulative, which apparently cause the problem. It's nothing to do with infidelity, it's to do with leaving your undies on the bathroom floor. But I would say that's all linked to us guys, right? But the number of times that I've been into the loo, mixed loos, where the ladies come out and she's left the toilet seat down instead of putting the toilet seat up. I find that really annoying. No, I do.
Now, we can do it the other way. It could be lid down and seat and lid down, because for feng shui, that means you keep all your money. Have the lid up.
Oh, really?
All of it can disappear, so always keep it closed.
But I never keep my money in the loo, Esther, so I don't have that problem.
Be much safer. Nobody'd look there, would they, to steal anything? But maybe it is those little things, accumulative little things, and it is. It's that dirty coffee mug by the bed, or whatever it is. It is all those things, and as you say, yesterday's clothes on the floor, all of those
Take a note, Phil.
Oh,
so it went up during lockdown, but I think it was. Look, you're used to time away from your other half. You're used to doing other things, and that being locked down, maybe when you hadn't seen them for day after day, week after week for years and years, and then you saw them full on. But there was also an increase in people getting married as well, finding relationships, coming back together.
Yeah, but that's interesting. But of first marriages,
yes,
45% don't make it. 45% don't make it. Second marriages, no, they don't. They just don't make it. They're divorced. And they reckon 33% of second marriages, don't make it. They just don't make it. You know, it's a completely different world. I think of my parents, they were there forever. You know,
I don't know. You're good at doing all the maths and the stats. So we were a lockdown wedding. Lord knows what percentage we've got for success there. I was first, marriage, 45%. You were second, 32%. So do the probabilities. Do we stand a chance, or are we over by next year?
I'm not sure.
Have I introduced something that I shouldn't have introduced
to? My life's going to be a nightmare now. But talking about lockdowns, my big thing of the week was about Chris Whitty. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up, could you, really? I mean, Chris Whitty said this week that the lockdowns have been terrible for childhood obesity, which is now significantly worse, and lives could be cut short because of it. That school closures had been an absolute disaster for school children and all the rest of it. And that lockdowns have done a huge amount of damage to mental health, people's mental health. And I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be nice if Chris Whitty had been in a position to do something about this when he was there?
Right, okay.
And blow me, I mean, you couldn't make this. I mean, I just don't know. I don't even know where to start with it. I mean, he's so short-sighted. He must have been so short-sighted looking at COVID that he should be on a Specsavers advert.
Yeah, I like that.
To be perfectly honest.
And he was knighted?
He was knighted for services for being short-sighted.
OK.
I mean, I just don't know how he's got the nerve to say this when he was the biggest advocate of lockdowns. And now, lo and behold, what we've been saying all along, that they've been a disaster. And he's now realised, unfortunately, 2 years too late. But I mean...
There's a lot of people rewriting history on this. I mean, some of us...
Not as badly as that, though.
No, but a lot of us said, though, there is a cost of COVID, we get that, but there is a cost of lockdown that will go on for years and years and years. And even the cost of living a crisis now is in part due to lockdown. And if you think we spent 400 billion during lockdown, and now when people are saying, can you help us with the cost of living crisis, we say there is no money left in the coffers because we gave out 400 billion during that period of time. So you're quite right, there were lots here, but award for short-sightedness
and brass
neck goes to Chris Whitty there. Yeah. Well, I've got a totally different story, and I thought this was interesting. I saw it in the Times this week, and this is about e-scooters and people where they should go at about 15 miles an hour. No, look at this. Mechanics hacking e-scooters to push speeds of over 50 miles per hour. And the reason I bring this up, having been, speaking to taxis know everything, don't they?
They should
of what is happening in the world. Exactly, they should be running the country. And they said, you know what, the roads have gone like the Wild West. There's so many different sorts of vehicles on the road now. So you've got cyclists, but you've also got electric sort of bikes as well. You've got those rickshaws. You've got now these scooters, and you've got super fast scooters. You've got those segways. So as I said, you've got loads of people on the road, lots of them not paying any tax, not paying any insurance.
Do the e-scooters have the same, do we have to apply the the same rules to e-scooters as we do to push bikes and cyclists. In other words, they sort of take up half the road.
Well, they're all doing their own thing, but have they got, you know, protections? Have they got insurance? What happens if they hit somebody at 50 miles an hour? And that's what they're saying. We need to re-look at the rules because, to be fair, it's the pedestrians now. Honestly, you are taking your life in your hands because things are whizzing by at different speeds. So I actually think that one is true. But I said it was just because this taxi driver said to me, the roads are now like the Wild West. And actually, there are. You can do whatever you want at any speed.
In London, if you're going at 15 miles an hour, you'd be going twice the speed of the average. You would. I don't know why in London they'd want to go in. Are you an e-scooter man?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm a bit like Jeremy, what's his name, Clarkson, when it comes to sort of anything on two wheels. You know, I'm not. I remember seeing the first one. I think it was the lovely lass from one of the programmes on TV, which they do houses over and all the rest of it. And she used to arrive to the studio, to the house, on a little scooter. And I thought that was crazy. I had a scooter when I was 8. That was enough.
That you pushed with your foot?
I pushed it with one foot.
Have you got another story?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. We're talking about, we're having a little grumble, and I'm at the age now where I think I'm going to have a grumble, right? I'm all for... it's a democracy, and I love democracy. Look at Russia, you know, I'm so grateful that we've got what we've got in our country. When we're not happy, we can say so, right? But I think there's a time at which you say, come on, let's slow this down a bit. Technology is important. We need technology. 5G is developing right across the country. And now we've got a group of activists that are totally creating havoc because of 5G. There are certain parts of the country. There's a particular MP, actually, who's affected by this because she lives in a rural area. I can't remember.
Elaine Saxby.
Right, OK, thank you. And she lives in a rural part of the country where a lot of her you know, constituents are struggling because of, you know, they haven't got access to good Wi-Fi facilities. 5G going across the country, this lot are saying we don't want it because there's a chance that it'll penetrate your skin, the radiation will penetrate your skin. There's this whole conspiracy theorist bunch going on saying, right, it causes COVID-19, right, and other viruses. So what they're doing is, instead of just arguing about it intelligently, they're actually torching the masts. And I just think, come on, for goodness sake, we've had enough. We've had the statues coming down. We've had all sorts of stuff going on. Enough is enough. I think it's time to pull together. There's enough problems in the world. Let's embrace technology, or either that, or let's all accept that we go back to the old.
Yeah.
It's probably the same people who are complaining about the 5G masks that are complaining that they haven't got any coverage.
Right, exactly.
It's probably exactly the same. Yes. I must say, though, I will say one thing. They are a monstrosity, these 5G masks. They are.
But I think that touches on the lawlessness. So when I said the Wild West on the roads that the taxi driver's talking about, the lawlessness there, taking the law into your own hand and just burning it down. We had statues knocked down. There is an element of lawlessness and a lack of discipline creeping through in the country. Do you think?
100%. I mean, you know, I'd hate to go the opposite to that, you know, where it's a totalitarian state. But I do think that, you know, we're very lucky that we live in this country. We really are very lucky. And I think we should embrace all of the wonderful things that are given to us. And technological advancement is critical for our future. I mean, in that particular case, I know there were instances where in certain areas they couldn't get through the emergency services because, you know, the masts had been taken away.
Kevin Woodford, thank you very much
pleasure.
Indeed. So, is the world going lawless? I was going to say that. Should we have some GB views?
Yes, we should have some GB views at gbnews.uk. I was going to say thanks to Kevin, apart from reminding Esther about all the things she hates about me at the start of the show.
I didn't need reminding, Phil. But go on.
Anyway. Anyway, despite the cut in petrol duty, there was precious little else in Chancellor Rishi Sunak's spring statement to halt the frightening rise in fuel costs.
With gas and electricity bills set to triple over the course of this year, is it time to re-examine the country's commitment to net zero until a more robust energy policy can be put in place?
We're delighted to be joined by Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, who was due to have a campaign rally in Bolton this morning, but which was cancelled. Richard, can you
very good morning to you. And I can't believe I'm here in the studio. I was supposed to be down the line, getting ready to go on stage in Bolton, in front of hundreds of people. Well, unfortunately, we think we live in a democracy. We think we have free speech, but it turns out that if you're not willing to talk about the right thing in the right way, you're not allowed to. So we had the first venue booked, which we've used before, very nice football stadium. they decided that no, despite a signed contract, you're not allowed to talk about net zero. And then the second venue, booked, a very nice guy, the threats and the intimidation that he had from people, from the environmental lobby groups, was horrendous. And then one of our speakers from the Labour Party was threatened with having the whip withdrawn.
Oh, wow.
If he was going to talk about net zero with people from other parties, such as my good self. And you think, hang on, I mean, on this really important issue, which is so, our view is very simple. We all care about the environment. We all want to reduce emissions and have cleaner air, but there must be a discussion about the best way to do that. And our concerns, we all want to do our bit. Our concerns is that Westminster's, and it is Westminster as well as Boris, net zero plans is the wrong bit at the wrong price. And we're seeing the price as we speak. And let me tell you, I regret to say, we are just at base camp, Everest base camp, of the cost of net zero. We already learned that our energy cap in 6 months' time is going to go from just under £2,000 to just under £3,000. And so it goes on. And we've got to have a debate about the way to have cheap, reliable UK energy. And we also want to talk about the treasure that we have in this country. And it's extraordinary because under our floorboards, i.e. under the UK, we have this wonderful thing called shale gas. And it's incredibly valuable. In fact, it's so valuable, it's to the value of the country's mortgage, all the national debt. Imagine me saying to you, you've just inherited a house from your very generous parents, and they said, oh, by the way, there's some treasure under the floorboards. We never bothered to sort of dig up the floorboards and get it out. You say, well, do you know what? I think I might go and find a screwdriver that can undo the screws, lift the floorboards, and dig out the treasure because it's that valuable. And imagine how easy life would be for the Chancellor when he's giving a spring statement if he doesn't have to worry about the finances because all of this value has been created and extracted.
So what do you think all of the upset was and all of the bullying and intimidation that you couldn't have this big event today? Was it on the referendum on net zero, or was it people anti-shale? Because there's two different things going on.
They're two different things. You're quite right, Esther, and it's a bit of both. Look, there's a lot of money in the vested interest making huge sums in renewable energy, in these huge wind farms, offshore wind farms, massive subsidies. I mean, off-the-scale subsidies. There's a reason why there's 25% of your electricity bill is what they call environmental levies. That's subsidies to rich, mainly overseas investors, wealthy landowners, taking money from the poor and giving it to the already wealthy. So there's the vested interest there.
And you want that to go, that 25% off fuel bills,
that should
and that
go.
could help
the VAT,
on fuel costs.
The VAT on fuel bills should also go. That was a Brexit promise that the Prime Minister seems to have forgotten. And then also, we should be using shale gas. But of course, there's lots of people who don't want shale gas because they've got other interests. And let's remember, it turns out, and it's been written about in all over the place, that many of the environmental lobby groups, their funding came from Russia. Why? And this was all over Europe, because Russia wanted to make Europe dependent on its gas. The last thing Russia wanted was a shale gas industry in Romania, Poland, Bulgaria, Spain and the UK. So they worked very hard to stop it.
Can I just, I mean, I'm with you on net zero, and I can see the analogy with Brexit in the sense that all the parties in Parliament are all offering the same thing and that the public are miles ahead, as they usually are on this issue in the way that they were on Brexit. I understand that analogy, and therefore the referendum. But the bit I don't get on all this is why a referendum? What would the referendum question be, and what difference would the answer make to government's policies?
Well, the first thing is to have a debate about the different ways of reducing emissions. And then it's always a matter for the Electoral Commission to say, right, this is the question. But the point is that at the moment we're not allowed to have a debate. And if Westminster's only offering one solution, if all the main parties have the same net zero objective in their manifestos, the public haven't got a choice. So at that point, when you get a situation where Westminster's completely out of touch with the people, actually a referendum is the right way forward, particularly for something which is even, do you know, it's actually more important than Brexit in people's pockets. It's going to change the way you heat your homes, the cars you drive, what type of things you can eat, how much you can travel. This is life-changing stuff that is going to burden and blight.
Are you, do you think,
people.
always going to be on the outside, shaking up politics in a way, bringing the big debates forward? Because what you're sort of saying there is politicians have gone tone deaf. They didn't see the big issue of the day with Brexit, what everybody was saying in the country. They're not saying now how painful this cost of living crisis is going to be, how painful it is going to be to try and find the money to pay for those energy bills. And what you're saying is there are ways we could make life easier for the public. And you are, again, campaigning from the outside, calling for a referendum. Is that your role forever now in life as the person who's going to be championing the public to sort of rebel against politicians?
The point about democracy is you debate and you discuss, and then you give voters a choice. What are the best options, having looked at everything? And we want to be engaged in that process. And it's really, really important. And we'll get better answers if we have better debate and better discussions on the way through. So it's not just about having, bums on green benches. It's about shaping and influencing the debate. And what we think is needed is change.
Well, I do see here in the paper, if Philip's got it open, the Times there, page 15, PM does not want fracking anywhere.
But there's a really important thing here. The treasure is shale gas. There are a number of different ways that you can extract the shale gas. And if people don't like fracking, why wouldn't we look at being a world leader in the latest, the best, the most advanced techniques, other techniques, to extract the shale gas and say, do you know what, let's tweak it, let's learn from it, adjust it again, and be a world leader. Boris loves to be a world leader.
I'm thinking it's really important now that we are in charge, we have security of fuel as best we possibly can. So yes, you'll be looking at sort of nuclear, yes, you should be looking at shale, you should be looking at gas, you should be looking at everything, because otherwise you are going to end up taking things from either Saudi Arabia, you're going to be taking it from Russia. So this security, and the Prime Minister wants security, means you do have to look at shale.
The point is, what Kwasi and the Prime Minister seem to forget when they want more and more wind farms is that A, the wind doesn't always blow. Are we going to have the candles out when the wind doesn't blow? And B, electricity doesn't power 25 million domestic gas boilers, perfectly decent gas boilers. They need a thing called gas. Why should we import gas from elsewhere at a much higher creation of CO2, 4 times the creation of CO2 if you import gas than use your own domestic shale gas?
So where next for a campaign rally?
Well, very good question.
Where might we see one?
We'll come back to you on that one.
Well, it seems to be on GB News today. This is where it is.
This is the campaign.
There's all sorts of ways of making a noise and making people aware of this campaign. And, the slogan is very simple, and it does what it says on the tin. Vote power, not poverty.
Well, look, if people want Richard Tice with his net zero campaign to come to their area, let us know. They might have a venue. They might take you down to their local pub. So that's what we want to know. Net zero referendum. Richard Tice wants it. Lots of other people want it. Do our viewers want it too? Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. So coming up, we're looking at the hidden costs to British businesses of the war in Ukraine.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, welcome for your GB views. Philip, give us one there.
Well, Keith says, if I ruled the world for a day, then I would disband this inept and self-serving cabinet and replace them with a cabinet chosen and led by Nigel Farage. So, controversial one there, Keith. We've got Tim Rice coming on to tell us what he would do if he ruled the world for a day very soon, so we'll see if he would choose that too.
We've seen the headlines about fuel prices and rising inflation, but what about the hidden cost of Russia's war on Ukraine?
A lot of British businesses have been forced to pull out of Russia because of sanctions. But there are also a number of companies that had operations in Ukraine which have also been badly hit.
Joining us in the studio is Darren Selkis, Chief Executive of the YouView Group. Darren, tell us about your business and what's been sort of happening.
Our company is the YouView Group PLC. We manufacture and trade wood products all over the world, specialising in decorative wood surfaces and veneers. Over the last 2 years, been a lot of chaos due to COVID, lockdowns, restrictions. So when war in Ukraine started and we have a joint venture plant in West Ukraine, there was added chaos.
And you know, you've got a factory there, isn't it? It's on the border of Poland. And how have the staff been? What's happening to the factory? Can you still work there? I mean, what is going on in your factory?
Well, fortunately, we're about 500 kilometres away from where the ground fighting is going on. So there's no physical attacks going on the ground, but there are air attacks and missile strikes in the region. But there's a tremendous amount of fear. Our people are scared for what's happening now, their families, their futures, and life is far from normal. Some of the people from our factory have gone off and volunteered to fight. Others have volunteered as medics and gone off to those hot zones and helping the wounded. So there's not a good feeling at our plant, and people are very, very scared. We aren't able to run properly. I mean, one of the dangers is we used to run the plant 24/7, but now we can't have light escaping the factory at night because it would make us a possible target. So we're only working daylight hours. And during those daylight hours, the people are far from working normally. You know, they have other things on their mind.
How many people do you employ there?
350.
Gosh.
And see, people don't think about this, do they? That, you know, where you would have got sort of wood for whether that's windows, laminate floors, furniture, wood frames, whatever it is, a whole construction industry. People don't think that those factories are in these parts of the world and now the staff can't work there. So what impact is all that going to have coming forward on the prices of, as I said, flooring, construction, DIY, furniture?
Well, we manufacture a raw material that's used we sell business to business. And we sell to British companies, for example, making doors or furniture or panels, and all of that ends up in construction. So it's quite a long supply chain. When something happens to the cost of our raw materials, whether there's a shortage of logs or shortage of production, that it takes quite a while to filter through to our customers and then to the construction industry and the end market. So there is a time lag. What we're experiencing in our industry in the huge inflation now is not a result of Ukraine yet, and the sanctions on Russia. It's a result of what happened over the last 2 years and the lockdown. So our industry is already on its knees. So when you add something else in, like what's happening in Ukraine, and you know, Russia was the third biggest timber exporter in the world, and there's sanctions on them, and quite frankly, nobody wants to buy Russian products anymore. So when those items are gone, you have to replace it with something else. And
so what you're saying is nobody is feeling the impact of this Russian-Ukraine war yet. All of the price inflation so far is just coming from COVID, and that was, the world being locked down, now open up, and you've got that on wage inflation, you've got that on travel, fuel costs, cargo, everything.
Fuel was almost immediate because everyone knew that oil and gas comes from Russia and through Ukraine. But in our industry, yes, absolutely hasn't hit yet. Probably will start hitting over the next month, but it will get worse over the next 6 months with the shortages and demand far outweighing supply and those supply constraints forcing prices up.
And are there other places in the world where they can increase their production levels of wood to make up for the loss that's going to be coming from Russia? Or is...
Two things. Firstly, normally yes, but our industry is already on its knees after suffering through COVID. I mean, another one of our plants, the first 6 weeks of this year, we were running at 50% capacity with most of our employees off isolating for Omicron or showing symptoms, albeit very light. And we've never caught up from that. So the shortages were there already, and we're already on the back foot. That's one. The second thing is normally the global market is able to react to a shortage in one particular place. But due to global shipping basically failing, it's now so expensive to ship product from another place that can produce it competitively that it's now not competitive to ship it in, or there isn't shipping available to do so. So it adds complexity to that global supply chain.
So what are you going to do?
There's inflation. Huge inflation, shortages. We have substitute products that we are producing, not what people want, but people accepting it because it's what's available or can be produced cheaper. Ukraine produces probably a quarter of all the oak veneer in the world. Now, that's not particularly sexy if you don't know what oak veneer is, but when you take out a quarter of a product of global supply, the impact is enormous. There will be inflation. And if there's not inflation, you can't have what you want anymore. You have to have something else. And it all leads through to that cost of living crisis and everything becoming more expensive for everybody.
And what I was reading about as well, because we talk about Ukraine, but I also want to talk about the regular working folk in Russia too, who, because of sanctions now, haven't got a job, and they're left penniless and poverty-stricken. They're wanting to flee the country. I was even looking at things like Nestle. They've just got rid of 7,000 people, just regular workers in Russia, because nobody wants to buy their products and the sanctions we've put on them as well. And like you've just said, 60% of some of this wood comes from Russia. Are all of those people going to be without a job?
I mean, that was more or less the plan of the sanctions. We wanted to punish Russia and force them to, economically to withdraw from Ukraine. So, Putin said it's an economic war, and yes, that is what the West is doing to try and get Russia to leave Ukraine and end the war. So yes, Russian people are going to suffer.
You have a story as
well.
Well,
I was speaking to somebody who's taking a Ukrainian refugee in, and the refugee was saying that where they are in Ukraine, there's a lot of Russian nationals there, and actually the Russian nationals have had their pensions taken off them. They're not getting paid their pensions, and so there's lots of Russian nationals in Ukraine who are
because of the sanctions.
They're not having any income, and the Ukrainians are actually helping destitute Russian nationals because they're not getting any pensions. I mean, which is a heartwarming thing for happening, but it's amazing the knock-on impacts of what's going on.
And that's why we called you in here today, Darren, because you're very close to what's going on. You've got businesses, as you were, factories around the world. You've got it in Ukraine, and you can see firsthand what's happening with the jobs, the factories, the supply, but then what the cost is going to be to us in the UK in the next 6 months with inflation.
Well, I mean, that's the absolutely frightening thing. We've already got terrible inflation and a cost of living crisis, and it's going to get worse. What's happened in Ukraine and the Russian sanctions are going to have an increased effect over the next 6 months and make things worse. And quite frankly, a 5p cut in fuel duty is going to do absolutely nothing at all to help the people in the country and the people that need it most. You know, something a lot more needs to be done and changed.
Darren Selkis, Chief Executive of YouView Group. Thank you very much for joining us, and we wish all your staff in Ukraine all the very best.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Esther.
Oh. Coming up, we're joined by a genuine legend of the music industry, Sir Tim Rice. So stay with us.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, welcome back. You've been sending us in your views. David says here, of course there is increased lawlessness when the country is run by someone who takes no notice of the laws set by Parliament.
Paul says we need to look after the environment, but carbon zero and net zero is nonsense.
James says this country is ridiculous. There is 500 years worth of coal under our feet that is sat there doing nothing, all because of those people screaming about global warming.
And Ted says cyclists should be registered, insured the same with scooters, not child scooters, just like mopeds. Pedestrians have rights as well as cyclists. I have found scooter riders much more thoughtful than cyclists.
And Nikki says, I've been listening to GB News for 5 weeks now after being a lifelong BBC viewer, but feeling increasingly concerned by their one-sided narrative. I'm now hooked. Welcome, Nikki. Welcome on board.
Right, every week here on Saturday Selection, we like to ask a famous figure one simple question. What would you do if you ruled the world?
This week, we're delighted to be joined by one of the country's most successful lyricists, who's written the words to countless hit musicals and songs, including Joseph, Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, and The Lion King. Sir Tim Rice, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. So, if you rule the world, what would you do?
Oh, I don't know. I hate to rule the world, especially at the moment. I can't think of anything particularly serious in the sense that there are so many problems going on at the moment that to even try to enter them with thoughts from outside is almost incomprehensible. I can only think of one or two fairly trivial things like banning shorts for blokes over the age of 35. Or fairly serious things like smart motorways. I see that one or two of your contributors have had a go at them, and I think they're absolutely insane. I mean, I cannot see any argument in favour of them, and they're very dangerous. It almost puts you off going onto motorways at all. Ruling the world is something I would really not like to do, ever.
Well, I think lots of people will be with you about the people over 35 wearing shorts, Tim. I think
well, only blokes, only blokes, although that's probably sexist and now illegal to say that. Postmen, I think I would exempt postmen from this because, but I've just taken my hound dog to the vet, and on the way back I kept passing, because the sun's out, a lot of people in shorts. I thought, this is not adding to the gaiety of the nation.
And what is it? Is it white legs? Is it hairy legs? Is it knobbly knees? I mean, what is it that is so offensive that knees must be covered after the age of 35?
Well, I don't know. I'm probably not 100% serious on this one, but I just find it strange that sometimes, and all through the winter, people wear shorts, and maybe it's good for you. Maybe there's something I just don't know about. There's some secret formula to eternal youth if you wear shorts in bad weather, good weather, whatever. I'm not absolutely convinced that it's something that adds to the gaiety of the nation. No, as I said before.
The thing is with this, Tim, is I wouldn't just leave it at shorts, to be perfectly honest. When I used to work for Asda, people used to come into our stores in all sorts of stuff. Well, I'll say also, actually, often they used to come in with very little on, to be perfectly honest. So you'd have these sort of huge beer bellies in the middle of summer and barely a pair of shorts on. And I always used to think it wasn't going to be good for trade because it put people off their food just looking at these people going around there. So I think if we're going to ban shorts, we should also force them to cover up their stomachs as well during the hot weather.
Long tops and long trousers.
Exactly,
that's what we're saying.
absolutely.
Now, you said you wouldn't like to rule the world, but you do, in a way, rule the airwaves with all the sort of music and songs that you've written for and musicals. And I guess I always wondered, what is it that makes somebody a great lyricist? I mean, what is it? How do you capture a mood? What do you do? How do you even set about writing something?
Well, gosh, there's a few questions there. Firstly, I'm in the business I'm in really through luck, because many, many moons ago I met Andrew Lloyd Webber, who was absolutely single-minded about getting into the musical theatre, which he loved. I knew a bit about musical theatre, and what I'd heard mainly on record I liked, but I was much more interested in rock and roll. Indeed, Andrew was interested in rock and roll, but theatre was his number one thing. Rock and roll, music, Elvis, the Everly Brothers, Cliff, this is all pre-Beatles stuff. Those are the people I kind of admired, but I never dreamt that I would ever be remotely in that business. Although I did eventually go into EMI Records as a sort of, well, technically I was called a management trainee, but really it was a sort of office boy. But I did get all around all the departments, and I learnt a lot about the record business. And I kind of assumed that I would end up by about the year 2010 being a sort of moderately high executive in EMI somewhere. But that never happened because I met Andrew and we got distracted and we got very lucky. And I enjoyed writing. And I never approached it other than as something that I wanted to do for fun, for enjoyment, and to try and create something that other people might like. And I didn't think of it as a career until about 4 or 5 years in, when it became clear that what we were doing had struck a few chords with people. It's so much is accident, and I've been very lucky.
Tim, if somebody was watching the show and said, "Do you know what? I want to be the next Tim Rice. I want to be a lyricist."
I'm against that.
How on earth do people sort of go about it? I mean, is it something that comes naturally to people, or is it something that you can learn and have a path towards becoming an expert?
Well, it's interesting because there are so many books and things and courses on how to write musicals, how to write songs, how to do this, that, and the other. And they're always written by people who haven't actually quite done it. And I always think it's something you can't really teach. You've got to have incredible enthusiasm and incredible dedication. And perhaps dedication is even more important than the enthusiasm. You've just got to keep flogging on. And if you want to do something, you've got to obviously be keen to do it in the first place. But I don't think there are any rules. The first rule for writing musicals or songs is there are no rules. And if you try and copy the previous generation or somebody you admire too much, you'll only end up being a sort of bad version of them. Whereas I think if you can actually do what you want to do, if it's any good, in the end, you'll find out. And if it's not any good, maybe you should try something else.
You're no stranger to awards or the Oscars that's on tomorrow night, or, you know, a whole array of awards that you've got. So I'm just wondering what it's like when you're up for an award, when you're up for an Oscar. You've been shortlisted. What's it like to be sat there?
Well, the Oscars, which I was involved with in the 90s, I haven't won an Oscar for ages. I'm a has-been Oscar-wise. They were great fun. It was fun sitting there, and you mustn't take them too seriously, in my view. And the best song category isn't one that the press are that interested in. Maybe if it's a Bond song or something, they might be. But it was fun. I tried to treat it as an interesting night out, as sort of going to a nice party. And if at the end somebody was mad enough to give me an award, that's great. But you should never take these things too seriously. On the other hand, it is much better, or it's much nicer if you win rather than if you don't. But, you know, sometimes you do win, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're not even nominated. But I think the awards thing is slightly in trouble. Every awards show one watches now, and I must say I haven't been to one for a while, they don't really seem to work as well as they did, whether it's because people try and get too political, try and air their own personal views, and forget that it's really about entertainment or not, I don't know. But the Oscars are in trouble. The audiences for the TV have gone plummeting. And it's possible. I mean, if somebody could come up with a new way of doing an award show, then I think they'd make millions. But I can't think of one. It's a difficult thing to... I mean, somehow you have to praise or recognise, rather, the major contributions every year. But ranking them isn't perhaps the best way to do it. I don't know.
Are you told in advance that you've won an award at these things? Do you have to?
No, it's live.
So it's not people feigning surprise then when they've won and
No. If it's I mean, certainly from my experience in the Oscars and things, you're not told. And it's possible that sometimes, I mean, some of these things I think you can get as quite a strong hint if they really put pressure on you to turn up. And of course, if you're getting something like a Lifetime Achievement Award, which usually means your Over the Hill Award, they obviously tell you about that. But no, I mean, Oscar-wise, I hadn't a clue whether we were in with a shout or not. It was quite exciting, therefore.
You maybe haven't won an Oscar for a while because your virtue signalling wasn't good enough in your acceptance speech, Tim. Maybe you needed to do some better virtue signalling.
No, I think it's mainly because I haven't written any songs for a film for a while. That's probably the main reason. But my last acceptance speech, I think I thanked Dennis Compton, the famous cricketer, which, as Dennis Compton, one of my childhood heroes, was not very well known in Los Angeles, it was slightly baffled the audience. But I have to say there ought to be a law against making too many political statements if you're just getting an award for a song or something.
Now, this isn't an insult here, Tim, but I believe you're a sod.
I am a sod, yes. This is a member of the Society of Distinguished Songwriters, SODS. And it's a wonderful society. It's really just a gathering of friends who write songs. And they tend to be, not exclusively, but they tend to be songwriters who are not performers. And they were a huge, huge contribution to British popular music in the 20th century, and indeed still are. But the emphasis on songwriters who don't perform as well has slightly disappeared. Most of the best and most successful songwriters of today are all performers, which is fine, of course. If they're the best, then good for them. But the days when great singers would, I mean, which probably goes back to the 30s and 40s, would regard their material had to come from songwriters who in themselves were a completely different breed. Those days have kind of gone. Songs today tend to be written, an awful lot of them tend to be written in the studio and put together by the producer, by, you know, the guys playing or girls playing the instruments. It's a different world, and we sods probably have slightly had our day, but we do have most wonderful evenings reminiscing about how things were much better in our day.
As a lyricist, and your sort of musicals have toured the world, so whether it's Evita, whether it is Joseph, whether it is Chess, what happens when they're translated to other languages? Do you say they've ruined my words, or do you not understand it enough to know if they've ruined what you've carefully crafted for this musical?
Well, I wouldn't know, as I don't speak most of the languages they've been translated into, but you can get a feel whether the show's working by the enthusiasm of the audience or lack of enthusiasm of the audience. And it's quite, I quite enjoy going to see, I went to see Joseph in Czech once, and it was, I don't speak Czech, I don't speak a single word of Czech, but it was great because one was able to, in a way, listen to the music in a way without worrying about whether they get the words right. I assume because the way the actors moved, it was a good translation. But it's quite nice to be able to sit and watch one of one's own shows and not worry about one's own contribution. I just think, yes, Andrew wrote some great tunes there. I knew that all along, but it's wonderful not to panic whether somebody gets one word wrong, which you do if it's in English. If somebody gets a word wrong, I go, which is silly because it usually doesn't matter. But so it's great fun seeing some of these shows in foreign languages, and it feels great to feel that stuff you've done, even if mine is translated, has actually made it to other countries. And it's the story that matters almost more than anything else. So if you're telling a good story, that can often work in any language.
So Tim Rice, it's been an absolute pleasure for you to join us on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing us your insights, particularly about the Oscars, which I was particularly interested in.
And about those over 35 wearing shorts.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
Oh, Tim, bye-bye.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
The government is facing criticism over long waits for its visa schemes for Ukrainians fleeing the war. According to the Home Office data, over 35,000 applications have been submitted, with just over 20,000 visas already issued under the Ukraine Family Scheme.
The government says it's moving as quickly as possible. Our East of England reporter Amelia Harper has been visiting waiting host families who are among the 150,000 people signed up to the Homes for Ukraine scheme.
Millions of Ukrainians are being forced to cut ties with life in their country. In Essex, one family is not only welcoming refugees into their home, but is also trying to help the women who have fled and remain in Europe. From their dining room, volunteers from the Pachamama project make reusable period products. Founder, student Ella Lambert is taking them to the Ukraine-Poland border.
When there's a catastrophe, when there's a crisis, a humanitarian crisis, period poverty is sort of on the bottom of the priority list. Unfortunately, people rush to support people with shelter and medicine and food, which is obviously, extremely important. But they forget about what happens to women when, they've had to leave everything. I imagine we'll be taking between 2,000 to 4,000 pads, at least initially, which is about 250 to 500 people.
While Ella prepares for the trip, her mother Heidi is preparing to host refugees.
Well, you watch the news every day and it's absolutely devastating. And you think, well, if I was in that situation, I really hope someone would open their door to me and my family.
You do coloured ones and I'll do Ukrainian.
Yeah. No one should do this lightly, and you have to assume that the people coming to stay with you are going to have been through the most unimaginable things. They will have experienced trauma, and just be prepared for that.
It's something that Elaine Cully from Hertford has also had to consider.
We have the space in our home, but we also have the space in our head to deal with our guests when they get here. So we thought we'll give a little, and hopefully that will mean something big to someone.
A mother and daughter are set to join them in the UK, but organising their arrival hasn't been straightforward.
The visa application forms are not designed for people who don't have the native tongue of English. That has been quite difficult, trying to explain what various questions mean and what kind of answers we need to get. To be fair, everyone we have contacted have been really helpful, but not helpful because they don't have the information. So we're kind of in this limbo stage and just waiting to see what happens next and how we do it.
For hosts like Heidi and Elaine, still a waiting game, keeping a close eye on new family members as they travel from Europe to the UK. Amelia Harper, GB News.
Coming up, Kevin Woodford rejoins us to have a look at Saturday's front pages. That's still to come here on Saturday Selection.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Saturday Selection here on GB News with me, Esther McVeigh and Philip Davis. Coming up in the second hour of the show, we'll be taking a closer look at some of the stories making today's front pages. We're asking, should the government be doing more to get society back to normal in this post-pandemic world? And we've got all your Saturday sport and showbiz as well. But first, let's get the latest news headlines.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his troops' resistance have dealt powerful blows to Russia. It's as Moscow claims Russia is moving to a new phase of its so-called special operation to focus on the eastern region of Donbass. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says more than 100,000 people still need to be evacuated from Mariupol. Addressing global leaders in Qatar, the Ukrainian president compared the besieged city with Aleppo in Syria, saying it lies in ruins.
All the roads to the city are blocked. Russian troops do not allow to the city even humanitarian cargo. No food, no water, no medicine. Around the clock, the city is being shelled. 90% of all buildings in Mariupol have been already destroyed. Thousands of people are dead. But Russia's invasion still remains unchecked.
Meanwhile, the UK's Ministry of Defence says Russian forces continue to besiege a number of major Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol. It claims Russia is reluctant to engage in military ground operations and is instead relying on airstrikes to limit its own already considerable losses. The ministry also predicts Russian forces will continue to target urban areas at the cost of further civilian casualties. Former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram told GB News Russia has failed its main objective to topple Ukraine's capital.
I think with the casualties that there's been and the way the Russians have attacked the civilian population of Ukraine and destroyed Ukrainian cities. I think the Russians retaining a single square metre of Ukraine will be unacceptable to the Ukrainian people and therefore President Zelensky. If there is some form of diplomatic settlement, if Russia still retains an element of Ukraine, the West doesn't need to back down, and I don't think the West will back down.
The UK is providing £2 million of food supplies to parts of Ukraine encircled by Russian forces. The government said around 25 truckloads will be transported by road and rail to communities in greatest need. Policing Minister Kit Malthouse says the UK is one of the world's leading donors, supplying £400 million worth of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. He told GB News 150,000 families in the UK have stepped forward as part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, with 20,000 visas already granted.
We recognise that the system can be sometimes bureaucratic. We have now streamlined it. We've made the form easier to use. We've expanded the number of appointments to 13,000 across Europe that people can attend. We're constantly working to try and make sure that the system is as smooth as possible for people wanting to bring Ukrainians to the UK. But we have to do that safely, in a way that's safe for them and also safe for us.
In other news, a P&O ferry has been detained in Northern Ireland for being unfit to sail. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency says the European Causeway ship is being held in Larne due to failures over vessel documents and crew training. It comes days after the ferry operator sacked almost 800 seafarers, replacing them with agency staff on cheaper salaries. Shadow Minister for Employment Rights, Justin Madders, says these kinds of actions have serious consequences.
Really got to use every tool at the disposal of the government to make sure P&O understand that they can't get away with treating people like this. In the end, if that's the way we go as a country, we're all going to lose out. So we've absolutely got to stand firm with those who've been sacked and do everything we can to send the message to P&O that those staff have got to be reinstated.
A third round of searches is underway for a second black box of a Chinese plane that crashed 5 days ago. The China Eastern Airlines Boeing 737 nosedived into mountains in a southern region with 132 people on board. No survivors have been found yet. One of the black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, was found last week and sent to a lab in Beijing to be analysed. The Duke of Cambridge has said the UK would support any decision made by a Caribbean state to become a republic. Prince William and Kate have been visiting Jamaica, Belize and the Bahamas as part of their Caribbean tour. Speaking at a black tie event in the Bahamas, the Duke said that whatever the future holds, the bonds between the UK and the nations will endure. And the drummer of rock band the Foo Fighters, Taylor Hawkins, has died at the age of 50. The world-famous band were on tour in South America when they announced his death. The band's lead singer, Dave Grohl, say they are devastated by the untimely loss. There are no details yet about how he died. That's your latest news. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Saturday Selection.
Hello, this is Saturday Selection on GB News. I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis. Coming up, we'll be joined in the studio by financial expert Justin Urquhart-Stewart to tell us exactly what this week's spring statement from the Chancellor means for us all.
But first, let's welcome back celebrity chef and award-winning TV presenter Kevin Woodford to go through some of the stories that you've seen in the papers today.
Well, it's Mothering Sunday tomorrow, isn't it? And those lovely ladies, they'll still be using those gems that were used many years ago. You know, if you don't eat the crust on your bread, your hair won't go curly. Well, I never wanted curly hair. And if you don't go to sleep, the bogeyman's going to come and get you. And I could never get to sleep. But I genuinely wonder whether or not, because it's a special day for the mums tomorrow, and they should have something lovely to eat. And I'm just wondering whether the whole nature of gastronomy is going to change, because you'd never give your mum fish and chips for Mothering Sunday. But with the price going up the way it is, there's a possibility it'll become a bit of a classic dish, to be quite frank. Classic in a different way to the way it is.
Just a quick question from a Yorkshireman here, Kevin.
Yeah,
why would you not give your mum fish and chips for Mother's Day? It sounds like a cracking treat to me.
Did he say this before you married him, Esther? Did he really?
Well, luckily, I won't. Luckily, I say I won't have a mothering Sunday. I don't have any. So that's fine. But obviously, we'll have a word off air as to what makes a cracky meal. But you're the person to be speaking to, Kevin.
No, but I'm referring to the fact that there's a guy there with gastronomy. For goodness' sake, come on, you know.
But to be fair, Friday night we do Friday night pub fish and chips.
Perfect.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect, right? But I think Mothering Sunday should be something a little bit classic. No, yeah.
Go on. Well,
I'm going to spend time with you, right? I think I need to spend time with you for your mum's sake, right? But so what's happening now is fish and chips were a great staple diet. I'm a great lover of fish and chips. It's a tradition that we've had in our country for 160 years, and I'd hate to see us lose it. But again, sadly, because of what's going on in the Ukraine, Russia we're supplying 40% of our white fish. There was a 3% tariff on that. That's now gone up to 35%, probably a total block. America has completely blocked all Russian fish. It's coming from the Arctic, and it's great fish. That's the problem. The colder the sea, the better that fish is going to be. Such a shame. And on top of that, you've got, again, because of the war, you've got increases in price of potatoes because of fertilizer. You've got sunflower seeds produce our oil. That's produced in that area. There's this sort of catalyst of issues that are developing. It's the perfect storm. We're going to see fish and chips, they reckon, rising to 10 quid for a fish and chip supper. Now, I think that's such a shame. I think it's such a shame because it's such a really good meal. Done properly, there's nothing wrong with it. It's, you know, people say it's unhealthy. I don't believe it's unhealthy, you know. Providing it's cooked properly and the fish is cooked in really hot fat, the oil is dispersed, you know. And on a light note, when I was a young boy, I lived in the Isle of Man, and the best fish and chips came from a woman called Maggie, and her shop was called Maggie the Spit. And the reason it was called Maggie the Spit was because she used to test the temperature of the oil by a quick spit.
Oh.
Yes, she did. No, she did. And if it floated away, she knew that was the time to put
I couldn't go in there.
I've never done that.
No, but, you know, couldn't you have, as I always do, to check the temperature of the fat, though I can usually see that it's sort of got that haze over it, I drop one chip in, one bit of potato in, and that, when it boils up, bubbles up, as it were, you know. Oh, my goodness.
You've got a better tactic now.
No, never.
I mean, I want to know what people think about this. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I want to know where people... Because, you know, I'm telling you this, Kevin, I'm not... On Sunday, the original Harry Ramsden's in Guiseley, which is just outside my constituency, it's now called the Wetherby Whaler.
Yeah, right.
It will be packed on Mothering Sunday. I'm pretty sure it'll be packed on Mothering Sunday. It's a fantastic restaurant. It's a great place to go. And I think I want where are the Yorkshire people to say we want fish and chips?
You totally disagree with me on that. I can see that, Philip.
But on a food subject, there's one issue that I've been pushing very hard on is about this ridiculous ban there's going to be soon, or has been planned for, to ban buy one, get one free offers or any special offers on products that the government think are unhealthy. I mean, this sort of kind of nanny state thing is ridiculous at the best of times. But to do it in a cost of living crisis seems to me absolute madness. And in page 15 of the Times today, there's some good news here because it says that curbs on junk food may be delayed to ease rising bills. And so it says an impending ban on buy one, get one free junk food deals, so-called junk food deals, could be delayed after ministers were told to find the fullest range of measures to ease the cost of living crisis. And so I'm very much...
But you know who that was pushing them to find the ease to the cost of living crisis? It's a group called the Blue Collar Group. And Philip was pushing it because how can you have, in a cost of living crisis, you can't get promotions, you can't get one thing for free that you could put in the freezer and eat next week. So a little bit of common sense, but about time.
But the thing is about this is that The Guardian, this diversity of opinions that we have in our media, which is very much to be welcomed, The Guardian have a slightly different take on this on page 5. Large supermarkets pushing cheap meat despite pledges on health and climate. And I love the start of this article. It says, Britain's biggest supermarkets stand accused of bombarding shoppers with offers of cheap meat. Now, that as if it's some kind of terrible thing that they're doing during a cost of living crisis, to be bombarding their customers with offers of cheap meat. I would have thought that most customers in Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda and Morrison's would be delighted to be bombarded with offers of
As a chef, what do they mean by that? Because I would have bought mince. I would have got maybe the best cuts I could have minced, but mince would be classed as a cheaper meat, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Or stewing steak, as I would have got
Well, you
to
know,
do casseroles.
the whole concept of good food, if you look back, doesn't matter what country it is, France, Italy, wherever, right? They would take, because protein's expensive, no matter where you are. So they would take, you know, whatever the cheapest cut was, and they would cook it for very slowly for a long time. Correct. You know, we used to have, years and years ago, before, you know, things were okay for us as a young couple, we would buy hearts, lamb's hearts, you know, because they were really, really cheap, stuff them, cook them very, very slowly. But the cheapest, the cheaper the cut of meat, the tougher it's like.
Steak and kidney pie, liver and sausage.
Cook it slowly, you know, and put some vegetables in for goodness and for flavour. But cook it slowly, take your time, and it's fantastic. So but the interesting thing is now, if you go over to France or Spain or Italy, wherever, and you go for a ragout de bœuf, right, and you pay top dollar for it, the ragout de bœuf, the never-end de lamb, whatever the dish was, originally that was a peasant dish, which was for nout. But now, of course, it's classic, you know, and so you'll pay the top dollar. Cheapest cut. That's what we go for. We'd buy really good quality, go for good quality, but cheap cuts.
You see, my argument is that no product in itself is unhealthy. It's a diet that's unhealthy. And so they shouldn't be focusing on particular products. I mean, if you have one bar of chocolate every month, that's not going to do you any great harm. If you have one if that's all you ate, then it might be a different kettle of fish. And so, you know, they shouldn't be worrying about products. It should be about diets.
I'm going to look at this amazing woman, Iris Apfel, and she's 100, and she's a muse, a fashion designer, but she, at the age of 100, is going to be designing the clothes, the latest range for H&M. She's doing statement pieces. She's quite outrageous, sort of ruffles, outrageous colours, and look at her there, 100. What does this say? Does this say that you're never too old? Is this saying that you can be cutting edge at whatever age? This just fills me with hope and optimism that this lady of 100 is now doing high street fashion.
I was going to say, I hope I look like her when I get to 100, and then I thought, when I saw the picture, I thought, I wish I looked like her now, to be perfectly honest, let alone when I get to her.
No, that's got the same hair colour.
Well,
But seriously, that is fantastic. You know, we do bits and pieces with the cruise company, as you know, and there's people 85, 86, 90 years old on a cruise, and if you're somewhere lovely where you can go for a swim with sharks, with dolphins, in they go. Do you know what I mean? I love it. It's fantastic. I think the whole age thing now is changing, and I think we've got to embrace that.
And I have to say, best headline of the day was in the Mirror today, page 27. The canoe man, you remember him, the canoe man who faked his death. Anyway, this headline is, Canoe man faking my death nearly killed me.
Really? Slightly wrong, didn't he?
he was apparently so determined to sort of make it sort of look real that he actually almost did die.
My goodness, I love it.
Kevin Woodford, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Fantastic look at the papers there. So we saw the headline announcements from this week's spring statement: a cut in fuel duty, a rise in the national insurance threshold, a penny off income tax, but not for 2 years. But what does all that mean right now and for ordinary people suffering the worst cost of living crisis since the 70s?
Well, we're being joined by our resident financial expert and the co-founder of business networking service regionally, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Justin, we've seen what was in the Chancellor's statement, but what did you make of it? Did it cut the mustard for you?
What a pig's ear. It really was, I have to say. You just go through the logic of it, hang on, you say this is a time where people are going to have real stress and pain. You've been talking about this for several weeks, what's heading towards us, and with the gas cap coming off as well. I suspect we're probably going to be seeing having a summer statement, because there's going to be such a reaction when the gas prices, this inflation does hit through. And of course, bear in mind, I think something we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we've got future inflation because the Ukraine can't plant their harvests now for later on. So that means less supply, still more demand. and that's going to...
And like you said, if we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, months, the country's been talking about it, it wasn't like they couldn't have prepared for what was coming their way. So like you said, you think there could well be a summer statement then?
Yeah, because it's all those things directed the weakest in society and those with the broadest shoulders taking... No, actually, the weakest in society are the ones will be suffering with this. We only have to hold up how much has your packet of pasta gone up by in the past 6 months. And because of what's happening and because of the war, that's spreading out. And of course, there is another little issue relating to the war as well, because there are various countries, particularly, if you say Tunisia, Lebanon, Egypt, who are dependent upon Ukrainian grain. And if they don't get that, you're then going to get political unrest there. Those countries aren't exactly well known for political stability. And if you've got political unrest in countries which have issues with rebels and things like that, then you'll be finding a broadening out of the war into other areas. That's the bit that also frightens me. So we've got all these domestic issues to manage, work our way through, then political instability because of commodity prices.
I mean, I do worry how people are going to pay the bills this year. I mean, people, whether they're pensioners on a fixed income, whether it's people on benefits, businesses who are, they're having a tough time. Their costs are going through the roof. What if he did come back with his summer? What sort of things should he be doing to try and ease the burden on people?
Well, if I was trying to, had the time to do it, I would actually say, look, let's have a real strategic review as the sort of taxes we should have. Our tax system's a mess. So you're not going to change that in one budget, but as a longer-term view, simplify the tax system and make it fairer, because we've got national insurance and you've got income tax. They're both income tax. Simplify the process and adjust the weightings to it. Now, my view would be this is a it's a medium-term issue you've got to try and manage, but requires some emergency money now. So actually, for a period of, let's say, 2 years, whatever, we're actually giving almost furlough payments to people below a certain level to get them through this period. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but as we know, actually, in terms of quantitative easing, you can go through that process. Although the real pain of quantitative easing you saw coming through, that debt interest, you remember we talked about before, saying it was about 50 billion. It's now 83 billion pounds. That's our entire education budget. And remember, our defence budget's what's about 50 billion. And a third of our debt is index-linked. So the more debt you have, you'll find actually the cost of that's going up as well because of the inflation.
You see, Rishi would no doubt say as Chancellor, well, it's all very well, I want to help people and all the rest of it. I did through COVID, spent £400 billion. There isn't a bottomless pit of money, and we've got to live within our means as a country. Do you have any sympathy at all for the predicament he's in and the fact that he's trying to make that case that we've got to be responsible in what he can afford to spend?
And he's describing good longer-term financial responsibility. Quite agree with that. But we have a short-term crisis here, and it's a crisis coming towards us. We know it's there, just as we said in terms of the other issues of inflation. It's not, everyone's been talking about it. So we need some short-term actions on it, and that means giving maybe an extra payment for people below a certain level for a short period of time, provide that support. Do you do that then through the existing payment support systems and increase that for a period of time? That may be the easiest and cheapest way of doing it. But tell people, look, this is only for a finite period, and be able to then reduce it after that. Hopefully then, the worst of that, hopefully, would have actually passed. Because some of these issues, let's hope the war does resolve itself in due course. Let's hope actually the gas supply and other supplies actually start to even their way out. It's not going to happen in 2 or 3 months, but it probably will take a year to 2 years.
I do say to Rishi that the reason the country's got a financial problem in the government isn't because we're undertaxed. That isn't the issue, but I'm not sure how successful I am with that.
Well, that sort of links in there, Philip, to the Matt cartoon on the front of the Telegraph today. Man going to the bank and he says that he's been a victim of an elaborate scam. A charming man on TV said he was giving him a tax break, but then he, looked in his bank account and it was empty. And this is what's confusing people, isn't it? Because the thresholds have stayed the same for so long, and people are ultimately paying more tax because I think it's about 300,000 more people have gone into a higher tax band. So that, a joke there by Matt, but it was complicated and confusing, and everybody's paying more tax.
Yeah, well, if you have this fiscal drag, which isn't a cross-dressing accountant, but this drag. It's pulling more people into taxation at a time when you should know, actually, those people should be the ones exempt from it. And so it's creating more pain. Now, I'll be interested to see what happens at the polls that actually show not so much Labour doing fantastically, but how unpopular maybe the government is when it comes to financial, because the Tories have always been on the basis, we're good at financial control. That's what we do. Is that going to be popular now? I doubt it.
Well, put it this way, the PM could be worrying because, again, front page of the Telegraph, PM claims Sunak snubbed his plan to keep energy cap down. So he's already saying, bit of tension there, that wasn't how I'd do it. So you could well be right there, Justin. We could be having another statement in the summer with more help and support.
But he's gone from everyone loving him to, actually, I don't know what the opposite of that is.
Hero to zero in literally
That's
weeks.
very quickly.
Justin, thank you so much, as normal, for joining us today. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll be going through all of the Saturday's sporting headlines with the England footballers in action at Wembley.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Welcome back. Your views keep coming in. Alan here says, those who complain about delay should remember what happened to the Windrush generation because they were not properly documented. I imagine the government are keen not to inadvertently create similar problems for the future.
Linda says if you are an illegal migrant, you are welcomed and put up in hotels at the taxpayer's expense. Does this not show the incompetence of our politicians and the Home Office, who are overseeing this debacle and seemingly powerless to do anything about it? And John says, I'm sure years ago the chefs would spit in fat to make sure it was hot enough. They may still do it because the idea is the germs cannot live in boiling hot fat.
I still don't like the sound of it. I appreciate that, but I still don't like the sound of it. Jerry says, I only caught the end of the interview with your guest calling for a referendum about net zero. I absolutely agree. The whole idea is unachievable, unaffordable and completely unnecessary.
Now it's time to take a look at the weekend sporting action. No Premier League this week, but England are playing today as manager Gareth Southgate continues his preparations for the Qatar World Cup. Sports writer and broadcaster Aidan McGee is with us. Aidan, how useful will this run out for Gareth Southgate's team be?
I think quite useful, actually, Phil. I mean, you know, he'll have gone up to players, seasoned pros and mainstays of the squad like Kyle Walker, and he said to him, listen, come what may, you're going to be going to the World Cup. But I need to know what the people who stand in for you, who may replace you in the event of injury or suspension or whatever, I need to know how they're going to cope in the international sphere. Playing international football, despite the wealth of the Premier League, when England get to a major tournament, it's a different level of pressure altogether. Nothing makes you go out and buy a £10 barbecue from Tesco's, quite like an England semi-final or a final or something like that. I can just see you two rushing down to Sainsbury's now and throwing a few lamb steaks on the barbecue. But
sausages, actually.
So all right, fair enough. Whatever you fancy, a bit of salad as well. Yeah, exactly. So so you want to know about that. And they're playing a decent Switzerland side tonight. It's only a friendly. There's Ivory Coast on Tuesday, so we'll get a look at the Crystal Palace duo, Mark Guehi and Tyreek Mitchell. We'll see Kyle Walker-Peters as well. Emil Smith-Rowe didn't train yesterday. The Arsenal player, the Arsenal midfielder, Bukayo Saka as well, missed the penalty, of course, back last summer. He's got COVID, so it won't be as experimental as he likes, but it's a chance to look at a few players because he's going to need to count on them. He may need to count on them come November because that's when the World Cup's going to be, only 8 months out now.
And the brilliant results for Wales earlier the week. They're on the threshold of getting into the World Cup final proper, and obviously Italy being knocked out.
Yeah, I mean, what a come down for Italy. I mean, you know, they were dancing on the pitch at Wembley last summer while we were all drowning our sorrows and crying buckets of tears. And then a few months later, I mean, they always qualify for the World Cup. I think the last time they didn't qualify for the World Cup was probably, I can't recall them not qualifying for a World Cup. I can recall them not qualifying for Euros, but never. They're always a mainstay at World Cups. So what a huge come down for them. Wales huge for them as well. I mean, that was a really tricky fixture at home to Austria. Gareth Bale coming to the fore. He's only played 2 games for Real Madrid all season, and then he gets a lot of stick in from Marca as well from Spain. But there's also the issue of the Qatar World Cup, the morality of having it there. Now, this decision was made 11 years ago. Naturally, it's going to creep up the agenda the closer the tournament gets. But Gareth Southgate made a very interesting thing today. And Sepp Blatter, when he made this decision 10 years ago, and his cohorts to give the tournament to Qatar, they weren't thinking about the incumbents or the custodians who are going to have to deal with this issue 11 years down the line because they've long since left the set. But Gareth Southgate said, look, can we pick through everything here and find a reason to boycott something? I'll just give you a quote here just before we go. He said, we're in such a complex world, as we've seen with people criticising the Saudi investment in Newcastle, and then we go asking them to reduce oil prices. That's a football coach coming out with that. You shouldn't really have to.
Well, just on that footing about boycotting things, there's a chance that the Formula One Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia was going to be boycotted as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, they had a meeting yesterday. This happened in practice. It was in between 2 practice sessions. There was a blast or an attack, a missile attack about 9 miles away, but nonetheless, the drivers were nervous. They did complete practice. It's qualifying today. The main event is tomorrow. It does raise questions, though, long-term, Phil, about whether it can continue there, because there's controversy anyway that it should be in Saudi. They've already taken it away from Russia. Lots of other nations would be proud to have an F1 meeting once a season. I think there's a realistic possibility that could be moved. It may depend on the oil price.
Aidan, I tell you, George Clooney caught my eye.
What, me?
It wasn't just it wasn't just George Clooney. It was the story attached to him. Could he be buying Derby County?
I think he needs to think very carefully before he does. I mean, bizarrely, he gave an interview to Derbyshire Life. I mean, great scoop on there if you're a reporter on there and you come into your editor and say, I've got George Clooney. He lives in Berkshire, I understand. Obviously, I didn't realise he lived in England even. But Derby County is a club that's losing £1.5 million a week. It spent £200 million trying to get back to the Premier League, having the cup dropped out as long ago as 2008. Big club, a lot of history, 26 to 28,000. But the normal rules of business do not apply. We touched on it last week when we had Chris Wright on the show, the ex-QPR chairman. They come into a normal business. They might have run an airline, they might have run something else, a blue chip company. They come into a football club. There's player wages to pay, there's agents' fees, and there's transfer fees. One big black hole that swallows all your money. It doesn't matter how rich you are, you're going to come out of it poorer. Steve Parish on Monday said he bought Crystal Palace for £3.5 million in 2010. He said, you're never going to make money out of this. You've just got to decide how much you're prepared to lose.
5 years as owner, he probably wouldn't be as good looking, would he, after 5 years?
No, exactly. Running Derby, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Amy, thank you very
Cheers.
much indeed. Still to come on Saturday Selection, we'll be asking if the royal tour of the Caribbean has been a success. But first, here are the news headlines.
It's just after 11:30. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his troops' resistance have dealt powerful blows to Russia. It's as Moscow claims Russia is moving to a new phase of its so-called special operation to focus on the eastern region of Donbass. Meanwhile, the UK's Ministry of Defence says Russian forces continue to besiege a number of major Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol. It claims Russia is reluctant to engage in military ground operations and is instead relying on airstrikes to limit its own already considerable losses. The ministry also predicts Russian forces will continue to target urban areas at the cost of further civilian casualties. The UK is providing £2 million of food supplies to parts of Ukraine. The government said around 25 truckloads will be transported by road and rail to the communities in greatest need. In other news, a P&O ferry has been detained in Northern Ireland for being unfit to sail. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency says the European Causeway ship is being held in Laugharne due to failures over vessel documents and crew training. It comes days after the ferry operator sacked almost 800 seafarers, replacing them with agency staff on cheaper salaries. And Uber has been given the green light to operate private hire vehicles for another 2.5 years in London. The taxi company had previously been denied a licence by Transport for London in November 2019, but was granted an 18-month licence in September 2020, which was due to run out but has been extended. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Saturday Selection.
Do you remember phrases like hands, face, space? What about stay home, save lives, protect the NHS? The government worked very hard during the COVID pandemic on making sure its messaging resonated with the public.
But was that messaging perhaps too successful? As we emerge from the pandemic, is it time for a new public health campaign to ease us back into normal life? Or is that too much of a risk at a time when Omicron infections are as high as ever?
Let's get the view of Professor Mark Antonio Spada, Professor of Addictive Behaviours and Mental Health and Dean of the School of Applied Sciences. Mark Antonio, talk us through the reasoning behind the government's slogans and how effective they were.
So hi, Esther. Hi, Philip. I think if the objective was to ensure compliance through fear, they were very effective. The question is whether they were too effective and they've led possibly to the development of anxiety responses that may prove to be problematic over the long term. So we still have to see whether this will be the case. But if we look at data, and I'm thinking of data that's just recently come out from the ONS, we find that a third of adults aged 16 to 24 still report avoiding crowded places, and this rises to almost 70% or 71% for those aged 70 or above. It's a very interesting report. There is also data showing that the levels of masking are still very high. So for me, the main concern is, was the nudging too much? And what will be the residue? What is it that we'll have to face psychologically?
Mark Antonio, those figures are really interesting. I see from them 53% of people say they're avoiding crowds, 53% say they're spending more time at home, and 74% said they wore a face covering at some point in the previous 10 days, which I find quite surprising. What do you make of those figures? Did they surprise you?
No, they don't surprise me because if we look at the levels of psychological distress experienced during the pandemic, and some of the psychological distress will have been linked to the deaths, especially early on in the pandemic, to economic hardship, etc., isolation. Some of the psychological distress will inevitably have been linked to the threat messaging we were exposed to here and abroad, and I'm thinking Italy and other countries in Europe. So if we look at data from March 2021, which I've published recently and discussed in an article, in a news article, the UK had the highest level of psychological distress across 6 countries that were surveyed. That was March 2021. It was around about 2.5 to 3 times higher than pre-pandemic levels, and around about 50 to 70% higher than, for example, in Sweden. So I'm not surprised. There was probably an objective to ensure compliance, but we see, psychological costs that are considerable, and especially in the young. So the young remain, and returning to this report, the young remain particularly negatively affected from a psychological point of view during this pandemic.
And what is this sort of anxiety syndrome? Yeah,
so we identified in March, April 2020 with my colleague, Professor Anna Nikcevic, this syndrome that we thought was going to develop, also because of the fear messaging and potentially also the lockdown, which it consists of forms of coping like attention to threats, so looking out if other people have got symptoms, worrying, so for example, if you get infected, or checking the news, or over cleaning one's hands, avoiding public transport, etc. And we saw that throughout the pandemic, the levels of this syndrome remained quite high. And even in a recent sample that we have access to, a relatively small sample, we are seeing that as of February, March this year, still around 10 to 15% of individuals display these types of behaviors. And the problem with these types of behaviors is that they lock you into a state of fear. Because if you continue to avoid public places, if you continue to overwash your hands, if you continue to read the news and look out for threat, it's going to be very difficult to overcome any anxiety relating to the virus, especially if we have to live with the virus. And, we have an autumn season.
What should we learn from this? We had this nudge where we nudged the nation into a certain state of being, as you say, a certain state of fear. But what should we learn from this, and what are the ethics around nudge?
So I think what we need to learn is to moderate the nudging, to nudge to an extent, but also to provide information that is fair and true. For example, providing the risk by age, the average age of death, the fact that this virus is particularly bad in certain categories of people, or if you have a comorbidity. So maybe a more nuanced form of nudging would have helped. And then there's the question of whether you want to subject a population to the multiplier effect of locking them down and keeping them in a state of threat. So maybe if we go down the route of having a lockdown, we don't necessarily have to have campaigns that also terrorize us at the same time. Or we can have a sort of nudge campaign that makes a threat prominent in our mind, but we don't need to lock down people or adapt that nudge campaign for certain groups of people who are at risk. Because if we repeat what we've done, we're going to face another tidal wave of psychological distress, which we have now. The services are completely overwhelmed. Lots of young people with multiple psychological problems, addictions, etc. So the strategy will need to change.
Professor Mark Antonio Spada, Professor of Addictive Behaviours and Mental Health, thank you so much for joining us today. It just makes you wonder whether or not we'll ever get back to an old normal. Everyone talks about a new normal. Will we ever get back to an old normal?
But we need to unpick what this nudge theory does and what we actually expose to the public without really knowing the long-term effects. And do we now need a nudge campaign to get us out of a state
Back in
of
the other
fear,
direction.
to get us back out and back, as you say, into the normal again. Anyway, coming up, we will unpick the royal tour to the Caribbean, which may have done more harm than good for the monarchy. And it's the Oscars weekend. We've got all the showbiz news coming up too.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It will be fair to say William and Kate's royal tour of the Caribbean wasn't quite the PR success they were hoping for.
The tour of Belize, Jamaica and the Bahamas has been beset by protests from Republicans, accusations of racism and unfortunate photo opportunities.
So has the tour harmed the cause of the Commonwealth as more countries call for an end to the Queen as their head of state? We're joined in the studio by royal biographer and commentator Angela Levin. Angela, has this tour harmed the royal family even further in what's already been a pretty grim year?
Well, it's very difficult for them, actually. I think they were actually sort of blocked by pre-organised plans against them. I think it was extremely rude in Jamaica that as soon as they arrived, just come through the door, that the Prime Minister said, well, you should know we're going to take this further and we do. We've got our independence and now we want to get rid of the Queen as our head altogether. I mean, you don't do that when someone comes through the door. It's basic good manners, isn't it? You could have had a session where they had round the table talk about it, and it could have been done in a non-aggressive way.
But isn't that the way now with, it seems to be, with lots of things? People will invite you to speak at a university to sort of make a protest, or what do they call it, no platform you. People want to make that statement themselves, lure you in, make you feel that you're welcome, and actually all it was to do was to make this pronouncement.
I was going to say exactly that. Yes, absolutely. I was going to say, you know, with social media and physically, people get so angry instantly and want to attack you. And you don't know why. There's no need. It's not necessary to behave like that. And it's also blocking any other viewpoint. You know, this is the state of affairs. You know, we don't want you anymore. Go. It's extraordinary at a time when people know how to be polite and decide not to be.
But would you say they didn't help themselves? We've got some terrible photo or pictures of what went on, whether it was them shaking hands with some of the public through the fencing. I didn't understand why the fencing was there, by the way. And then that other one, which I hated, when they were on top of a sort of a Land Rover, a Range Rover, in their sort of a white military suit and the white dress and the hat. It just looked from an absolute different age. It didn't help themselves.
No, not at all. I quite agree. It was a real PA disaster. Usually their aides go out and investigate the places very, very meticulously. And if they haven't done it enough the first trip, they go out again. And there is it's inexcusable to have seen this fence. They look like Holocaust survivors behind a fence like that, a steel fence. A footballer had been there a few days before, and it was fine. You know, it didn't have the same impact. But it would be quite obvious that someone should have said, you know, where will people be standing? Where shall we stand? You know, anything we should look out for. And it was just a terrible view. And of course, anybody who is anti-monarchy would think, hooray, this is exactly what I've been looking for. I thought the two of them in the Jeep was ridiculous, wearing almost the same clothes and standing there. I noticed that Kate was hanging on for dear life. William was more relaxed about it. But it just looked absurd. And I think it was also because we've had the pandemic. We're not used to going out. We're not used to seeing great, big, theatrical stories. And it looked absurd. The other thing I thought was very rude was when they were going to arrive in Belize, no one thought to discuss with the government there where their helicopter should land. So although it might seem a small thing to you or me, actually, if it's your own country and a helicopter comes down without asking, it doesn't set the right tone. Today you have to be so careful how you behave.
Well, and I say there's a lot of people there who haven't done their job properly, have they? As you say, you go out on a recce, you sort these things out, you get agreement, you see if you're welcome. But for me, I was thinking, is this sort of the end of the royal family as we know it? Will they not be accepted in various places abroad?
Well, I think it's a heartbreaking thought, actually. Meanwhile, in Ireland, I know it isn't the same country, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall were having a great time. There was a lot of warmth there, and they were very welcomed. But because all the focus was on the Caribbean, that's reduced to small pictures. But if you see any of the films about it, they did extremely well. So I hope that will balance it out a bit.
I just thought, going back to the thing in the back of the Land Rover where they were stood there looking like, I thought that William looked like Sir Sidney Rough Diamond off Carry On Up the Khyber. It was from like a bygone age, wasn't it? Yes. And I think the thing that was crass about it was that there was all these complaints about the sort of colonial past of the United Kingdom, and all that imagery was of a colonial past, which then brought onto the subject of slavery and reparations and all the rest of it. It actually encouraged that kind of request, didn't it? It didn't sort of...
Yes.
It didn't look like a modern monarchy.
What would have been better, you know, it's not my business, but what I think was if they'd had a roundtable discussion with young people, asking them, what do you think about the Commonwealth?
Where should we be going?
Because a lot of the public there were cheering and shouting and delighted to see them and wanting to hold their hands. But there was this sort of clot of silliness and racism there that actually made it very difficult.
Well, they did. You know, the pictures, how it's portrayed, is very much a them and us. Us in front of the fencing, you behind. Us in a Jeep on a platform, you on the... I mean, it was so badly done. Do you think, you know, if Harry had have been part of the sort of the fold, if he'd have been getting on in the royal family, would he have made it more modern? Could he and Meghan have made that more modern? Because in a way, the king, you know, they are very starchy by who they are. The second son, could they have made this a better visit, a better tour?
Well, if we remember Meghan's behaviour when they went on their first trip to Australia, she walked out of a few things which she didn't really like. She went to a village and there was they had all the stalls there, and she decided she didn't like it, so she just walked away. And they said, well, she didn't feel very well, but it came out that she didn't want to be in a crowd. So I think we shouldn't put our pennies on that. But in a way, they seemed over keen and not quite mature enough, even though they are now in late 30s or 40s. Whereas I think that Prince Charles could have done it with much more experience. It's not easy being a member of the royal family. You really need to be there a long time to work it out. And I think that they hadn't been prepared by other people. But I do think that Prince William made up for it right at the end when he said, friendship endures, things change and friendship endures, and we will be there with you. Apparently he got in touch with London and said, what can he put in to save it a bit? And I thought that was very helpful.
Angela, Levin, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for coming in today.
Right, let's end the show as normal with the look at the big celebrity stories of the week with our Showbiz correspondent, Hayley Palmer. Hayley, it's the Oscars weekend. Who's going to be the winner? Who are going to be the winners and losers?
Oh, wow, here are my predictions. Let's go with Best Actor. It's got to be Will Smith. It's got to be. I think he needs to get his acceptance speech ready immediately because for me, him and King Richard, he was just wonderful. I know the odds are 1 to 10, and I do think it's his year this year. So we're going to go with that.
Okay. I didn't know that was how it was done. I didn't know that's how it was run.
I didn't know you were also down the bookies for placing your bets as well, Hayley.
Absolutely, Philip. Yes, and Best Picture. I think it is The Power of the Dog's year. For me, I'd like to see West Side Story because, I've seen it so many times, but I still get emotional when I see it. I just think it's wonderful what Steven Spielberg has really worked his magic. But I do think The Power of the Dog, it really is their year. They're up for, I think it's 12 nominations.
It'd be a bit of a shame if they didn't win one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think the Best Director award, as I said before, could go for Power of the Dog. I thought it was beautiful. I just thought the film itself was a bit slow, but the directing looked amazing.
Yeah, I think she will win it, absolutely. I know she is the first woman director to be nominated twice, so... I do believe that she will.
So that's not 10 to 1, this is 2 to 1, and she could be winning.
I'm making a note of that. Who are your other predictions then, Hay?
Oh, well, Best Actress, I'm going to say Nicole Kidman, because for me, her role in being in the Ricardos, I just thought she completely lost herself in that role. I didn't even recognise her, and I'd like to see her win.
And you were also at the premiere of Bridgerton.
I was on Wednesday night. What a real delight that was. I'm a big fan. When 80 million households tune in to a series, it's going to be good. They did in the series 1. Series 2 doesn't disappoint. Just what they're wearing, the romance. It's just great. And let's just say there is a love triangle, and you need to binge watch it this weekend.
Right. Well, there you go. There's a tip and a half. And the thing that struck me about the Showbiz news is it was Elton John being 75 yesterday.
Yes. How incredible is that? And I know he's bringing out an album, Diamonds, the ultimate greatest hits. So look out for that. And he's just an absolute legend, isn't he?
Angela, are you a big Elton John? Are you a big Elton John fan?
No.
No.
Oh, how can you say
no? He says no. He's like the king
when
of
I went off
music. Yeah.
When there was a podcast, Harry and Meghan's first podcast, and he was complaining that he couldn't go to all the places on his private jet as often as he wanted, and it was really difficult. And I just thought to myself, oh, please.
If that's all you've got to moan about, that I can't go to another country on my private... So the podcast went off, did it?
Yes.
But anybody else, any of those other films or anything? Will you be watching?
Yes, I like the Bridgerton, which came back yesterday.
Yes.
I love all that nonsense and the beautiful dresses and the dancing and the sexuality of it. Whereas you see from their eyes and their expressions, then that's really what they're after.
You've got a little grin coming on there, the sexuality of it. Who'd have thought it, hey? And you were at the premiere?
Yes, for Bridgerton. Yes, absolutely was. And that was a real wonderful experience, just seeing all the cast. I know Simone Ashley, she plays the new lead. And for me, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She's just wonderful. She really is someone to look out for. But like I say, you need to binge watch it because it is really, really good. In my opinion, I think it is.
I've never seen it.
You haven't seen it?
No,
No, we've got to get it. We've got to get.
Haley, I'm a politician. I'm allowed to be out of touch.
But
we'll let you off
part of the job.
Now I know there's lots going on, and obviously you'll be back with us next week.
Well, we're going to test you against your predictions.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week at 10 o'clock, the same time. There's somebody who won't be back next week, but he's been with us since the start of us coming on this Saturday selection. That was our producer, Mike Boville. So we want to say a big thank you and a big goodbye to our producer. But stay with us, because next it is Alistair Stewart and friends, keeping you right up to touch with what's going on.
Hello, good morning. I'm Luke Mile with your weather forecast for this Saturday. And it's a bit of a chilly start out there, but don't worry, with the sunshine, it is going to warm up quite nicely through the rest of this afternoon. We've got high pressure in charge of our weather at the moment. It's slap bang across the UK, keeping our weather fairly settled. There's not much wind around either, so it's not moving very quickly over this weekend, so keeping the fine and settled weather for most places. So lots of blue sky to wake up today. Those temperatures sharply rising through the morning with that strong sunshine. A bit more of a breeze through the English Channel than we've had over the last few days, so perhaps a little bit fresher here, but by and large it's a fine and sunny day. A little bit more cloud though across the far north of